We are picking up where we left off. This is part 3 of our series ranking all of the traits in Marvel Multiverse. Thanks for joining me. Let's jump into it. Next, we come to presence. We have an edge on ego checks that involve getting people to pay attention to us or to persuade them. It doesn't actually say the word persuade. It says to voluntarily do things for us, but that's persuasion, right? This is just a straight up edge on ego checks. There are some ego check traits which have riders or stipulations. This has none of that. There's no downside. Presence is really good. And if you're building an ego-based character and you want to build for the social interaction portion of gameplay, you really need presence. This is on a social ego-based character an A+. For anybody else, it's a B or a B+. I really like presence, and I think that it is the big ego trait that is worth taking a look at and taking. Next, we come to public speaking. You're great at public speaking and you have an edge on ego checks when attempting to persuade groups. I want you to imagine somebody who has the public speaking and the presence traits, which do stack. And maybe they also have the famous trait. In that case, you're able to get double and triple edge when you're trying to persuade people in the right environment. I have a player who has done this, and I've mentioned this before, but when you're able to stack multiple traits for persuasion checks in the right circumstance, you can regularly roll in the mid to high 20s for persuasion checks. On the right character, this is pretty amazing. It's more specific than presence, so it can't be a B+. This is more of a B, but it is a great trait, and it stacks with other traits really, really well. This is a fun, very, very fun trait, and on the right character, it makes you really an incredible face of the party. I love it. Next, we come to pundit, which gives you an edge on ego or logic checks made when giving an opinion via the media. Now, in order for this to work, your heroes must be in communication with the media, which means a very specific style of gameplay is going on, one that I do run, where public opinion and media coverage of superheroes is a thing and is something that I track, is something I pay attention to, is something that interacts and changes the world. But your narrator needs to have a universe and a gameplay style where this public opinion mechanic is essential and is part of the game. I can't give pundit the same rating that I gave to presence or to public speaking, but what I love about it is that it allows for ego or logic checks, meaning whatever your dominant mental stat is, you have the ability to use it. So this is brought down by the fact that this is for a specific style of gameplay, but it's brought back up because it allows for either mental stat. This is a B to a B-, let's call it a B, but it is a good trait. It stacks with other ones really well. Pundit pairs with public speaking incredibly well. It pairs with famous really well. It pairs with presence really well. This is a very good trait, and on characters that are trying to be more the communicator of the party, really good. Next, we come to quick learner. If you fail in action check, you have an edge on attempting it again. There are some situations where most narrators will say this is non-functional. If someone's trying to recall information, which is an action check, I allow that check once. Any more than that, and it's just saying, oh, you eventually have a perfect memory, or you eventually can figure anything out. And that's just not a good gameplay style. With physical tasks, trying to pick a lock, right? Trying to move something really heavy, trying to perhaps hack into a computer database. Those are situations where this can apply. And your narrator is going to determine what situations allow for you to try again and which ones do not. So this is very narrator dependent. Failing an action check is just not the worst thing in the world. In fact, failure leads to some of the most interesting moments in TTRPGs. As a result, I really don't love Quick Learner all that much because you will not know when you take this trait how often it is applicable. You really won't unless you've played with your game master before. This is a C+. It might flex to a B in the right campaign or with the right narrator, or with a lot of situations, this may be completely irrelevant and it might drop down to a D. So this is not something that you can rely on going into a game. And that's kind of a shame, but I think that you shouldn't be afraid of failure. Next, we come to scientific expertise. You have an edge on logic checks that deal with scientific research. And if you have a lab that is related to the field you're studying, you have a second edge. So this is a trait that can give you, in the right circumstance, a double edge. And that's cool. And it has to do with something very generic, which is scientific research. But how often this is going to come up in a game? Do you have access to your lab? Are you a logic-based character? These things make it far more situational. I'll say this, if you are building a logic-based character, you need to go out of your way to get a lab, because every trait that is going to give you the ability to build things or to research something, they all seem to really want you to have lab access. And so, little character building tip, if you're building a logic character, try to have a lab. It's just really helpful. And this is a trait that may or may not be useful depending on the way that your narrator interprets scientific research. Let's call it a B- because I like the idea of being able to research a concept and research lore. I like that idea a lot, but I struggled with whether or not this was a C. This is, in the right campaign, really good, with the right character, really good, but in a lot of circumstances, you're going to be able to gain access to the knowledge you're looking for through other mechanisms. So B- might be me being too optimistic on it. Your mileage may vary. Next, we come to signature attack. You pick one kind of weapon or attack power, so it must have an attack roll, and you have an edge every time you do it. This is up for the best trait in the game. Being able to pick your main thing and just getting better at it is a great strategy. I take this power on every damage dealing build that I make because it is that good. It's an easy A to start with. The real question is, what is the best trait in the game? Is it signature attack or is it combat reflexes? I have to say it's combat reflexes, so this is probably the second best trait in the game. If you are trying to build for damage, you need this. It's only a question of when you take it. A+, obviously. Next, we come to situational awareness. You have an edge on initiative checks. What more is there to say? Getting an edge on initiative means that you can potentially cripple your enemies or redefine the battlefield before they get a turn. This is always good. It's good on every character. This is an A, and I am sad if I build a character and I don't get to take this. It is that good. Next, we come to skeptical. Any character that is lying to you has trouble on the ego check to attempt to persuade you of something. On one hand, I love this, right? I have NPCs lie to characters all the time. Not with every character, otherwise it becomes predictable, but absolutely the world of a TTRPG is filled with characters that are not your friends, that do not have your best interests at heart, or are secretly trying to kill you. It's a wonderful portion of the game to slip in from time to time, and we want to have that. So at first, this seems like an incredible trait, but then you realize that the edge and trouble mechanic happens on someone else's roll. That's not brilliant. And the reason why is the gameplay mechanic. Because me, as the narrator, I have my NPCs lie. And then it is up to the player to say, wait a minute, do I believe them? So at that point, I roll a ego check to lie to the player, and with skeptical, that would be with trouble, of course. and then my player is going to roll some kind of an insight check, maybe logic-based or vigilance-based, depending on how the character kind of sees themselves and the way they interact with the world. That means that the player needs to initiate the check. And here's the thing about when I make NPCs lie. If you're a narrator, you've experienced this as well. Way too often, players do not ask for the roll. And I am not going to roll an ego check when I'm lying without being asked to. And so skeptical runs into this problem of being a highly useful concept that is instigated in a problematic way. Because of this, because the player needs to think about it, that pulls it down. So the question is, does that pull it down to an A- or to a B+? Because skeptical is still very good. I'm going to be optimistic and say that if you have a player who takes skeptical, they want to portray the character as being skeptical, and assuming the player remembers that, assuming they remember to ask for the check, skeptical is a great trait. We'll give it an A-. So it is very useful. Also, of note here, we're not relying on a particular individual ability score for the player to have, but on the ego check that the person lying to them has. As a result, it doesn't ask anything of the ability score of the player, and that does benefit the trait. Small is the opposite of big. Obviously, we get a +1 to our melee and agility defense scores, but we get -1 from our run speed. We are a smaller sized character. This has potential. Building a character that's a front liner that might be on the front line, and wants to bump up their defense scores, small's actually really good. This has a lot of capacity. If you are playing a character that attacks at range, this is still good because it affects your agility score. And it does have the detriment of reducing your run speed, but on some character builds, I would absolutely accept that. One cool trick to pull off in this game is taking the resize powers, going to smaller sizes in order to benefit your melee and agility defense scores, which at the smallest of sizes gives you a +5 to melee and agility defense, which is amazing. So small could actually be a really good strategy for somebody that is attempting to just bump up their defenses. I think I've got to give this a B+. This is really good. Sneaky comes up next. Enemies have trouble on all vigilance checks to detect us, and we have an edge on agility checks to sneak past them. So this has a dual mechanic, which is fantastic. One that affects you, one that affects your enemies. The first character I built on this channel for the core rulebook was based around the sneaky trait and was trying to be the ultimate infiltrator and rogue. And sneaky is wonderful in a character that is trying to be stealthy. On characters that are really melee based, they tend to dump their agility score and take the brawling power, and as a result, some characters, even an edge is not going to really help them all that much. So I can't say it's for every character. I can say that it's for many characters, and sneaky is, gosh, by my rules, when I say that a B or a B+ is a trait that is incredible on the right build, sneaky is kind of the definition of that, right? But it's so good that I almost want to give it an A-, but I've got to stick to my rules. Sneaky is amazing. If you are even thinking about an infiltration game, let alone an infiltration character, you really want to look at this. It is so close to A- that it's tough, but we're gonna go with B+ just to stick to the rules. But this is B+++. It's good. Next we come to Stranger. We don't know the local customs, and we have trouble on all checks that are made to decipher the culture that we are in, and when we're trying to pass ourselves off as a local. There's no upside to this trait. It's all downside, but it's fun downside. None of this is going to like cripple your character. None of it is going to make you lose control of your character. And so there's a really fun RP or character portion of this. At the same time, there's no upside, so I have trouble imagining taking this when I could just RP it and save the trait. So I don't think it's really all that great, but it's fun. And because it's fun, we're going C- rather than a D. But it's just not a great trait to take when you could be taking something else. Next, we come to surprising power. This has been really reimagined since the playtest material, but you are able to take a power you normally would not be able to. There are some very specific requirements here. You still need to have any prerequisite powers. Now, it does not say anything about power sets. So the big question with surprising power is, can I use it to pick up something in a power set that I am not in, if that power in the power set has no prerequisites? And that question is not specifically answered. I am conservative on my ruling of surprising power, and I say that you do need to be in the power set. So you can't use surprising power to just grab lightning actions, which has no prerequisites except for rank, more on that in a second, without also at least going into the power set itself. I've got to give the penalty for going into a power set at the rank where you take surprising power. But additionally, surprising power says that you can bypass all rank and origin requirements, and you can take this trait multiple times. So there are two really game-breaking ways to use surprising power. The first is lightning actions. Lightning actions is a power inside of the super speed power set that gives you an extra action and reaction. You have to be a rank 4 character and be in the super speed power set, but it has no other power requirements. Using surprising power to pick this up early in your character's career by bypassing the rank requirement is the most surefire way of becoming the hardest hitting damage dealer on the battlefield. It's absolutely insane. The second game-breaking way to use surprising power is to use it to grab Powerful Hex. Powerful Hex is a power that requires you to be in the Chaotic Magic power set and be a rank of 2, but it allows you then to create a hex that lets you use any power in the game as long as you meet the rank requirement. So Powerful Hex is kind of the opposite of surprising power. But surprising power is taken as a trait, usually once, unless you give up a power to do so. Powerful Hex lets you then bypass everything except for rank to grab everything else. And so there is a hack for a character to use surprising power, maybe as early as rank 1, to grab Powerful Hex, and then use Powerful Hex to be able to just copy any power in the game, and be able to do this from early on in a character's career. And that is kind of ridiculous. Surprising power is much better worded now than it used to be. I would like a ruling officially from Marvel that surprising power requires you to actually go into the power set that you are picking up from, but this is stupidly powerful. It has the ability to customize characters in incredible ways, and it does have the ability through lightning actions or Powerful Hex to make your character almost godlike at times. It's an easy A, and it's a little bit of a controversial trait because of some of the things that you can do with this power. Next, we come to tech reliance. You are reliant on technology for your powers, and if you would drop to 0 hit points or below, you actually drop to 1, and you lose all of your technology-related powers. I have a character who has taken this, and it saved his life, straight up. In the original playtest document, you could simply keep using this over and over again, and every time you dropped to 0 hit points, you lost 1 power. They changed it so that you lost all. In other words, it works only once, which is a little bit more fair. It will cripple your character until you can repair the technology, but this can save your life. It really can. And as a result of that, you really need a specific character, somebody that is technology dependent, but it's really good. So this is a B, and I probably would have rated this lower, but I saw this save a character's life on numerous occasions, and he survived. So this has a lot of potential for the right character. Next, we come to weakness. There is some substance that does damage to you, and if you come into contact with it, it does damage, bypassing damage reduction, and it cannot be healed through healing factor. There is no upside to weakness, but it does not only have a good character thing, this is something that you might put into a character because it's an interesting story. So you can't just RP this like we could with Stranger. This is something that has a mechanical aspect to it. Something that would normally just be detrimental to a character, I'd be likely to just give an F to, but I'm gonna give this a D. And the reason is there is an RP aspect to this, but it is all downside. There's no upside to it. I have not had a character take this in game because it is detrimental. And by the way, if you're a narrator and you have somebody take weakness, only break this out from time to time, right? Every now and then you bring out the weakness when they're least expecting it. That's an interesting way to utilize it. Having this be something that happens a lot is honestly not fun. So be careful if somebody takes this because they want to build an interesting story. They don't want to just get pummeled. Next, we come to weird. There is something strange, maybe even wonderful about you. You have an edge on all ego checks with people who are inclined to like you, but trouble on all ego checks on people inclined to dislike you. This just polarizes you. And honestly, it's kind of fun. There is a mechanical aspect that is positive and one that is negative, which I like that. And it makes your character just mechanically more interesting in the world. This is fun. I like it. This rises above being niche into the level of like a B-. If you take this, expect your social encounters to go in interesting directions, but that's the idea. I think it's fun. I think it's worth doing. That is it. We've gone through every trait in the game. I hope this is at least fun, if not hopefully very helpful for you as you decide how to build your character. YouTube is literally made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I'll see you next time.